Hello, good people of the world. This is the Real World Prepper. And I want to tell you about why it is so important that we teach our children, because our children are indeed our future. Stay tuned. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this hopefully won't be too long of a video, but I do have some content to cover. A lot of this content I've got was taken from an article from the Heritage Foundation. So let's just jump right into it. Is a specter of socialism haunting America, especially among our millennials? There is disquieting evidence of many young Americans' sympathy for socialism. Exhibit A. 2 million people under the age of 30 voted for Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders in the 2016 Democratic primaries and caucuses. We all know this. Exhibit B. Polls find that not only do a large majority of millennials have a favorable opinion of socialism, a near majority would prefer to live under socialism rather than capitalism. And Exhibit C, the no longer sleeping Democratic Socialists of America, or DSA as I'll call it from here on out, now boasts 30,000 members, over 30,000 members, most of them in their 20s and eager to follow the socialist banner. We've come a long way since the 1998 presidential race when George H.W. Bush buried his Democratic challenger, Michael Dukakis, for those of you that were there to remember that, by labeling him a liberal. Socialism is no longer a parlor game for academics, but a political alternative taken seriously by millennials who are not put off by the radical DSA platform. So, DSA believes in ending private ownership of industries whose products are viewed as, quote, necessities. The production of such products, it argues, should not be left to profiteers, i.e. capitalists. It also believes that government should democratize private businesses. That is, give workers control over these private businesses to the greatest extent possible. Anyway, socialism, explains a member of DSA's National Steering Committee, is the democratization of all areas of life, including but not limited to the economy. What is happening in America wants the apotheosis of capitalism. The first part of that answer lies in two words, and it's not Karl Marx, it's Bernie Sanders. The senator from Vermont captured the hearts and the votes of millennials with his call for single-payer health care, free public college, campaign finance reform, and racial, economic, and climate justice. The prime target of his animus was the top 1% of America who own, and it is true, some 40% of the nation's total wealth, as much as the bottom 90%. What Bernie rarely pointed out was that the same top 1% paid 40% of the individual income taxes. Sanders had a ready explanation as how to pay for all the freebies. Increase the taxes on the rich and their corporations. In Bernie's world, there is such thing as a free lunch, because the top bill will be paid by those at the top. According to one CNN analyst, millennials rallied many thousands behind Sanders because they are socially liberal, especially on LGBT rights, saddled with mountains of student debt, disillusioned with the status quo, and, quote, eager to break with traditional political models, end quote. Bernie provided solutions to all their problems without detailing the price or conceding the lessening in the individual liberty. Such details were swept aside by the revolutionary spirit of the millennials who, quote, felt the burn. As one Bernista said, you can build a powerful political movement with a base of 2 million. The second reason for the shift towards socialism was the Great Recession of 2008. It tore a huge hole in the American people's belief in capitalism as a way to a better life and sent them looking for alternatives. Many of them, especially younger Americans, found it in soft socialism, right? That soft cell that was part of a welfare state, part administrative state, and part socialist democracy. The most startling poll was the YouGov survey that reported that, given a choice, 44% of young people between the ages of 16 and 29 would prefer to live in a socialist nation rather than a capitalist country. Another 7% would choose communism. However, the same poll revealed that only 33% of the respondents could correctly define socialism as based on the common ownership of economic and social systems, as well as the state control of the means of production. So they couldn't identify that as being what socialism is. What most millennials mean by socialism seems to be a mix of a welfare state where they perceive to be Swedish democratic socialism, but Sweden and the other Scandinavian countries, including Denmark, favor the free market and are content with private rather than government ownership of their major industries. However, Danish domestic spending, including comprehensive health care, has a high price, the top personal income tax of 57%. Now our top is already paying 40%, right? So they want, by that model, the Swedish model, 57%. The new millennial trend toward an acceptance of socialism is not new. A 2014 poll by Reason Group, a libertarian group, reported that 58% of those aged 18 to 24 had a favorable view of socialism. A 2016 Gallup survey found that 55% of those 18 to 29 had a positive image of socialism, but 90% were favorable to entrepreneurs, while 78% favored free enterprise. Now, tell me how you reconcile that. How can a group be 55% socialist, right, and 78% entrepreneurial? Either through cognitive dissonance or just plain ignorance, I surmise. In any case, it is critical for advocates of free enterprise to make the case against socialism, because acceptance of socialism by any name places millennials on a slippery slope. Another recession and or a well-run presidential campaign by a charismatic demagogue, which we have plenty of that are vying for the position now on the Democratic stage, could move America further down that road to serfdom. And frankly, I think whenever Donald Trump is gone, that is exactly where we're headed. Not that he's the be-all, end-all, but that the fact remains. A 2016 Harvard poll determined that A 2016 Harvard poll determined that 33% of Americans under 30 wanted socialism. In January of 2016, YouGov asked millennials whether they had favorable or unfavorable opinion of socialism. 8% replied very favorable, 35% somewhat favorable, and a total of 43%. Almost the same percentage as that 2017 survey. But would these same millennials choose socialism if in exchange for free education and free health care, they would have to give up their personal property, such as, say, their iPhones? Would 7% of millennials declare their willingness to live under communism if they knew the real costs of communism as practiced in some 40 nations over the past century? The denial of free speech, a free press, a free assembly, the imprisonment and execution of dissidents, no free and open elections, no independent judiciary or rule of law, the dictatorship of the Communist Party in all matters and on all occasions? I doubt that. For the first time, but they don't know that. They don't see that that's the road they're trying to bring us down. That's the road they're headed for. For the first time in decades, socialists have taken advantage of the Bernie Sanders phenomenon to organize, raise funds, and field candidates from New York to Oakland, California, a major instrument of the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, about which the liberal New Republic asked, "Are the Democratic Socialists of America for real?" The most dramatic proof of socialism's newfound political clout was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's upset victory over veteran Representative Joseph Crowley of New York, number 4 Democrat in the House of Representatives. Ocasio-Cortez received 57% of the vote to Crowley's 42%, while pledging to back Medicare for all, free college tuition, legalization of marijuana, and the elimination of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or we know them as ICE. Attractive and articulate, the 29-year-old socialist declared that she would support progressive candidates who challenged Democratic incumbents in primaries. So it's the Democrats attacking the Democrats in this instance. You know, it's Democrats as we knew them, as our parents knew them, 60s Democrats, being challenged by these new socialists, i.e. communists. Marx, who's the writer, the founder of communism, socialism, he interchanged those words all the time. They meant the same thing to him, okay? So, anyhow, she would support candidates who challenged Democratic incumbents in primaries. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi cautioned Ocasio-Cortez not to oppose liberal Democrats who had a proven record of results. Even Joe Lieberman, the Democratic Party's vice presidential nominee back in 2000, warned that, quote, the policies of Miss Ocasio-Cortez advocates are the policies Miss Ocasio-Cortez advocates are so far from the mainstream that they would make it harder for Congress to stop fighting and start fixing problems. Meaning, all we're going to do is clog up the system. If there's anything to be done, the system's going to be clogged with all of this craziness that's being brought in by all of these candidates that are now, in the House and the Senate. He noted that Republicans were already referring to Ocasio-Cortez as the new face of the Democratic Party. True. But an ideologue like her, AOC, is unlikely to be ruled by conventional politics. We're seeing that already, okay? The same can be said of the Democratic Socialists. Over 700 elected delegates from around the country attended DSA's 2017 National Convention in Chicago, the historic site of many political beginnings, from the 1860 presidential nomination of Abraham Lincoln to the riotous 1968 Democratic National Convention. Veterans of the organization were, quote, blown away by the enthusiasm of the younger DSA members whose priority is to win elections that advance socialism. Chicago City Councilman Carlos Ramirez Rosa is one of DSA's elected officials. He advised an ecumenical approach for socialist candidates, that is, to run to people who want to run on the Democratic ballot line because it offers access to people who want single-payer health care and a $15 minimum wage. As part of its demographic outreach, Bianca Cunningham, the African-American chair of New York City's DSA labor branch, helped to form a national Afro-Socialist caucus. Until AOC's startling win, DSA and its leftist allies, they concentrated their elections at the state and local levels, and they had success, such as the victory of Councilman Khalid Camus in South Fulton, Georgia. Kashama Sawant of the Socialist Alternative Party won a seat on Seattle's City Council and pushed through for an increase. Of course, Seattle we're talking about. I mean, it's all, it's happening in these cities first, and it's coming to a town near you, right? Pushed through the increase of the city's minimum wage to $15 an hour. Running as a socialist, 34-year-old Franklin Bynum was elected a criminal court judge in Houston. In Pittsburgh, 8 Democrats sought the endorsement of the local DSA chapter in the primaries to sought the endorsement of the Democratic Socialists of America, rather than steering clear of them for the sake of, it's showing you that the line is shifting. If you didn't already know it, the line is shifting hardcore in the sand. This is why it's important for our children to know what the heck's going on, okay? And to teach them. Even in Tulsa, Oklahoma, one of the reddest of states, 4 Democrats ran as Democratic Socialists. It's not a liability to say that anymore, commented DSA activist Jorge Roman Romero. As proof of their expanding influence, socialists point to the radical magazine Jacobin, which has about 1 million page views a month, and the leftist podcast Chapo Trap House, which delights in ridiculing politicians and journalists on the center left. So they're attacking their own, is what they're doing, okay? And successfully, I should say. A Chapo co-host compared Hillary Clinton to a race car driver, Dale Earnhardt, joking that both had crashed because they couldn't turn left. You get it? Of course, Earnhardt was killed back in 2001 in a racing accident, as you all probably know. It was an unvarnished commentary, but no rougher than the frequent media comments about Donald Trump and Republicans and conservatives in general. Socialist publications like N+1 and The New Inquiry have attracted younger readers with their unremitting attacks on capitalism. So, after Trump's victory, commentators such as Michael Kazin, the editor of the leftist magazine Dissent, thought that the left would be defensive when Reagan and George Bush were in power. Instead, there is a renewed interest in the radical left and the possibility that the Democratic Socialists of America might be able and will certainly try to take advantage of it. What does all this mean? The socialist presidential candidacies, the national polls, the political organizations like the DSA, and intense media focus, what does that add up to? Are they the makings of a national movement or merely a passing fancy? I think it's the makings of a national movement, personally. Are they temporarily fueled by young people who will soon get caught up in the next political fad? Unfortunately, I think not. Let's judge them by the 5 essential elements of a successful political movement. That's charismatic leadership, a national constituency, adequate financing, media proficiency, and a relevant philosophy. Now, relevant philosophy could be argued, but according to them, it is. In some ways, the new DSA is reminiscent of the Young Americans for Freedom back in the early 60s. Then, YAF claimed membership of 20,000. It was backed by Barry Goldwater and his promise to offer a conservative choice, not a liberal echo. Raised money with the help of the older Americans for Freedom. He convinced the media, led by the New York Times, that at the time that the YAF was the wave of the future, and hoisted the anti-communist flag at every rally and meeting. It was the height of the Cold War. America was engaged in a deadly struggle with the forces of evil. So like the DSA, the YAF leaders were mostly white, male, well-educated, and from middle-class families. They were young men in a hurry, certain they could change history, and so they did. First with the presidential nomination of the conservative Goldwater in '64, and later the election of conservative Ronald Reagan as president in 1980. Bill Buckley was YAF's luminous hero, the St. Paul of the conservative movement, who went there where no conservative had gone before, into the belly of the beast, Harvard. As for DSA, it has national constituency, principled, if aging leaders like Sanders, like Elizabeth Warren, fundraising potential, big time, we know that, strong media interest, duh, all of the fake news is backing all of them and singing their praises. And a philosophy attractive to Americans, young Americans I might add, that are tired of sliding down the economic ladder and wondering what happened to the American dream. Before dismissing the Democratic Socialists of America and its compatriots as idealistic and naive, it should be remembered that the Tea Party had only 60,000 members in 2010, but won 47 seats in the House of Representatives that fall. So that should be a wake-up call for us, for this DSA and this whole socialist movement. On the road to socialism, DSA and its fellow socialists will seek to convert industries like healthcare into public utilities. They will seek to regulate coal mines out of existence. They will seek to subsidize sectors of the economy like solar energy and operate corporations like Amtrak and Freddie Mac through government. They will present socialism as the reasonable alternative to the unchecked greed of the captains of capitalism. However, as it grows in numbers and influence, and I'm drawing this to a close, DSA will encounter a critical discrepancy, the telling difference between its pure socialism and the soft socialism of popular opinion. That is, the telling difference between pure socialism and the soft socialism of popular opinion. That's what everybody's being attracted to. DSA purists seek public ownership of the means of production as well as centralized control of goods and services. Soft socialists will see a limited role for the private sector, a la Sweden. Will DSA be able to fuse the two kinds of socialism as conservatives like Frank Meyer and William F. Buckley blended traditional conservatism and liberalism back in the 60s and 70s, the beginning of the end for conservatism? Which brings us to the urgent need to depict the realities of socialism, and this is what this video is about. It brings us to the urgent need to depict the realities of socialism to Americans, to our children, and to young people who have never heard of the Berlin Wall, who have never heard of the Gulag, the killing fields of Cambodia, Tiananmen Square massacre, or the daily bread lines in Moscow. According to the YouGov survey, 1/3 of all Americans would prefer to live under socialism rather than capitalism. Why? Is it idealism? The desire for a classless society in which everyone is equal and envy does not exist because everything is owned in common? Is it a lack of knowledge? When asked how many people have died under communism, only 31% of Americans could provide the correct answer. It's over 100 million, folks. About 7 in 10 Americans could not define communism. Commented one millennial about his peers, quote, "They don't recognize that much of what they enjoy in life is a result of capitalism and would disappear if socialism were to be implemented. They have not seen socialism's failures firsthand." Well said if I've ever heard it, okay? So teach your children, patriots. The future is up to them. The future is in their hands. They are the key to our future successes or failures. So you and I think, are beyond doing it. Us old folks, right? It's up to the children. And right now, their numbers are strong for socialism. So raise your children up, your little ones, bring them all the way up to know and understand what is right, what is pure, what is wrong, you know, and have them steer clear of that. Have them understand that we can't repeat history that we've seen in other parts of the world. We can't have that in the United States. That's not what we were founded on. That is not what will keep us prosperous and growing as a nation. It's up to us to teach our children. It's our children's future. And it will be in their hands. Godspeed and God bless, and thank you for joining me on The Real World Prepper.